Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Political Power Ranker. I am Chris Berg, Political Director for the Next Star Media Group affiliates across the country. This is a show about fresh political polling from state to state, but today we're going to do a national poll. The man of the hour, the man who gets the numbers, the magician behind it all, but none of it's magic, it's all real, Spencer Kimball from Emerson College. He is the polling director there. Hello, Spencer.
Chris, great to see you. We got an exciting show. I would say let's ring some bells because we're going to look at the horse race 2028.
Here we go, ringing some bells. Tell us how you did this survey, Spencer, first.
But yeah, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. First and foremost, I thank everybody who participated in this survey. We send out our 30,000 text messages. We had about 1,000 respondents. And from there, we're able to take a look at just not the presidential race, but some of the issues that are impacting our days.
Excellent. And the first slide up is about President Trump and his approval rating and what the trend looks like.
We always take a look at the presidential approval rating. Here, President Trump's approval sits at 40%, which is about what we've been seeing all summer long. His disapproval is pretty solid there at 56%, right in between where his numbers have been for the last 4 or 5 months. So this looks pretty solid. When we look inside those numbers, we see that the Republicans, 85% approve of the president. But if you talk to a Democrat, 92% disapprove. So we see this big partisan divide. The independents are disapproving at 66%. So as we take a look at those midterms, that's an important number to look at.
That's a big number to look at. And to help us break these numbers down is Sean Trendy, the senior election analyst from Real Clear Politics. He's joining us today to talk about these numbers. Sean, what's your just first reaction when you see kind of a steady number for the president?
Yeah, at a certain point, the president's job approval number falls far enough that he gets into really, rock-ribbed Republicans, the true MAGA base, and it just can't really fall that much further. And it seems like that's probably about what Donald Trump has gotten down to. He's got the core Republican base and not much else. The question then becomes for the midterms if he can convince some of those people who don't like him, but also don't much care for the Democrats, to vote for the Republican candidate anyway.
And what about the independent number that Spencer just articulated? 66% disapprove. How does that play into who's actually going to go to the polls and vote and how they're going to vote?
Yeah, the danger to the real danger to the Republicans isn't so much that, in our polarized era that Republicans start voting for Democrats. It's that these weak Republicans, people who don't have a strong connection to the party, don't have a strong connection to the political process, decide it's not worth it. They're just going to stay home. If that happens in the fall, that's where this starts to turn from just a bad election year to a catastrophe for the GOP.
Clearly, the Republicans are seeing these numbers too. The president is seeing these numbers. We're seeing kind of a trend in Iowa right now where cabinet folks are heading there to raise the flag and support Ashley Hinson, the senator, and obviously the governor candidate as well, Zach Lane. What can they do to help win these people back to them or get them to make sure they come out to vote?
Yeah, that's the key to the game right now, this mobilization drive that you see among Republicans to try to get them enthused. If nothing else, to try to get them scared, to lay out the parade of horribles about what a Democratic control of the House and the Senate would mean, just to try to get them out to the polls by hook or by crook. It's going to be, you may not like us right now, but you're really not going to like what these other guys are going to try to do.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, Sean, on that. Let's move on to the next slide that we have in our bucket today. This one is about possible matchups here for the presidential race in 2028. Spence?
Yeah, this is an exciting point to look at because you've got 5 potential matchups between either J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio from the Democratic side to the Republican side. And as you notice here, it looks like Marco Rubio performs better than J.D. Vance in these head-to-head matchups. And if you take a look at the big picture as well, it looks like Newsom, Buttigieg, and who else? And Ossoff are performing better than AOC or Harris. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a gender divide that starts to emerge in those general election matchups. If we're just starting to see a glimpse, I think Ossoff doing as well as he is doing raises an eyebrow from what we saw a couple of weeks ago in our national poll. But generally speaking, it looks like the Dems come out with a slight advantage heading into 28.
And that's the reason you put the senator from Georgia in your poll, because what we saw the trending from a couple weeks ago.
Exactly. Those were the top 5 Democrats in our poll. So we put them against the top 2 Republicans. So we had the 10 ballot test to look at.
Sean, just first initial reaction to what you're seeing here. This is kind of the first time we're seeing this kind of head-to-head for 2028. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great data point, a great source to draw upon. For me, what really stood out was that Kamala Harris didn't fare particularly well in that poll, and particularly against Rubio. And what makes that so interesting is that the Democratic primary schedule, remember, this isn't a national election to be the Democratic nominee. It's a series of contests, and it is path dependent. Whoever wins the early races gets a leg up, gets momentum. And so you have a situation where South Carolina is a state where she could potentially do very well. It goes into other states. This isn't the Iowa, New Hampshire axis anymore that would benefit a candidate, or has previously benefited candidates like Buttigieg. So it's going to be interesting to see if she can keep get any momentum out of those early races, especially if she continues to not fare as well as some of her competitors.
Right, exactly. What about the Rubio-Vance dynamic? We hear a lot about that across political channels that you're watching and paying attention to. Tell me how that's playing out in the White House when they see these numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think Donald Trump, whatever else you want to say about him, is not necessarily known for his loyalty. It's kind of, what have you done lately? And if it really starts to become a problem for Vance, the only way that Rubio becomes the nominee is if Donald Trump turns his back on Vance, and that probably only happens if Vance's polling numbers really start to crater. So I think Rubio in certain matchups running a couple points ahead of Vance isn't going to be enough to do it. But if Vance starts to really take on water, then you could start to see a situation where some real momentum starts to build behind Rubio's candidacy.
And it's getting back to the Vice President Harris and AOC. This is not a gender thing, is it? Or is it a candidate quality thing? What do you think?
I think it's less a gender thing and more of a known quantity thing. AOC has been in the public eye forever. Well, it seems like forever. It's about a decade. And Kamala Harris obviously has run for president previously. So when you're getting numbers for candidates like Ossoff and Buttigieg, you're really getting something more akin to generic Democrat. And so we'll have to see how they're able to paint the picture and how their opposition is able to paint the picture to keep them from ending up sliding down to where the other two candidates are.
And then one last slide here before we got to take a break. And this one is generic congressional ballot. Spence?
Yeah, this is one you got to pay attention to, because the Democrats have been doing fairly well in our numbers for the last couple of months. This is the first time we've seen them kind of pull back a little bit, right at that 50% threshold. And the Republicans are still in the low 40s, but they're not losing ground. So that 11-point race is now tight into 8. And we'll see what happens as we come out of Labor Day. Voters focus in. We'll see if those numbers tighten or if the Democrats can bounce back and have that bigger lead.
Sean, what do you attribute the tightening of this number to?
Two theories. The first one, which I'm not that crazy about, is that the DSA candidates winning have kind of scared people into voting Republican. I don't know. I'm skeptical that people are really paying that level of attention. What I think we're seeing more is just Republicans coming home. That you're getting people who don't necessarily like what Donald Trump is doing, but still consider themselves Republicans, still voted for Trump 3 times, deciding, okay, yeah, I'm going to be voting for a Republican this time around. We probably get that down, another couple points of gain for Republicans, and then we really get to see what's going to happen as the independents start to break.
Excellent analysis. Sean Trendy from Real Clear Politics. He's their election analyst, senior one. We are going to be right back, though. We got to take a quick break, but with more numbers and more discussion about national politics coming right up. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker, where we're breaking down a fresh national poll done by Emerson College Polling Director Spencer Kimball. And we have Sean Trendy from Real Clear Politics here. Sean, let's just talk a little bit more about the DSA versus mainstream Democrat divide that's happening out there. You said a moment ago you didn't think that was, you may not think that that's part of the tightening of the race, but go into that a little bit further, because for some people, that may just scare them straight a little bit, seeing some of the things that they support, like no prisons and healthcare for all, and so on and so forth.
Well, I think there's two things that play into that. The first is that for whatever reason, Democrats seem to be better at breaking away from, kind of the movements on the extreme, and so it's a lot. It's a lot of Democrats would say, no, I don't believe that, right? That's the normal Democrat. The other thing is that for whatever reason, the DSA hasn't become as well defined, as clearly defined as, say, the Tea Party was, a decade ago. So I just think for the normal person who's not real clued into politics, the DSA is still kind of a mysterious thing they haven't quite sorted out yet.
Got it. Spencer, you have a quick question?
Yeah, on that follow-up, mentioning the Tea Party, that movement starts 15, 16 years ago, and we can talk about how that escalated. But today it's kind of fizzled out. Where do you see DSA going? Do you think that's going to be a movement that's going to last through the presidential, or is this something that is really on the ropes at this point?
Yeah, I think the DSA probably has another few years in it, and who knows? The Democratic Party has been kind of gradually moving leftward from Clinton. So if they notch a couple good wins, they could continue to have momentum. But at the end of the day, these sort of intra-party factions tend to die out, and you're left with something closer to the core of the party alignment is what ends up happening.
And our viewers got a quick look at our next slide that is coming up, and Spencer's going to explain that slide, all about DSA versus Tea Party, right when we come back. So we're going to take another quick break. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker. We're talking a national poll today done by Spencer Kimball. Spence, we saw that slide. We got a tease of that slide a few minutes ago on the DSA versus Tea Party and the analogies that we can make there. Let's see that slide again and talk to us how you came up with it.
Sure. Let me talk about how we replicated this study from a CBS poll that was done in 2010 when they were studying the Tea Party movement. And as you can notice here, 29% at that time aligned with the Tea Party movement. When we asked about the DSA movement of today, that number is 23%. So that there was more popular support for the Tea Party movement that we can see in these numbers than currently for the DSA movement. When we take a look a little bit deeper into those numbers, we see where the Democrats align. 46% of Democrats see themselves as DSA. It's almost 2-to-1 with a big chunk undecided. Within that, though, there's a big age divide. Those under 50, 53% are DSA. Those over 50, 37%. So we can see within the party how that's fracturing between the constituents. But overall, is definitely a trend within the party, and we'll see how it continues to play out this election and into 28.
Sean, looking at this trend, what are you seeing? Where do you see it going, and how much of an impact will it have, both positively and negatively, potentially, to the Democrats in the fall here?
Yeah, the negatives I think are easier to see, are easier to kind of see that it pulls the party leftward. You really do have some out there candidates running this time who are sincere prison abolitionists, that can be used to paint the party in the upcoming midterm election. At the same time, though, you have to look and say, well, what about Democrats? Just like Donald Trump reached out to kind of right of center people, centrist people who felt alienated from the political process. Do these DSA candidates manage to bring in new voters, people who leaned left but thought the Democratic Party didn't really represent their interests or their values? Which of those is the bigger source of strength? I don't know. But I think that's going to be one of the big stories we follow going into the November midterms.
There is no doubt they bring an energy to that side of the aisle that is new and different than we've seen in the past, and similar to a Tea Party dynamic from 2010. All right, Spence, we got more issues to talk about. We've got a slide about the U.S. And the Iranian war.
So here's another issue that we've been tracking since February. Back in February, 40 to 47% approve to disapprove. That number is now 36 to 49, suggesting that there's less, approval for the war at this time. Be interesting to see how Republicans run on this issue. It's not overwhelming. It's not 80% are against the war. It's still right around the 50% threshold, but it is a minority opinion, and it'll be one that is going to be talked about on the campaign trail.
First, Sean, just initial thoughts on these numbers, and then I got a couple questions for you.
Yeah, it sort of, it sort of makes sense given what we know about American history. Americans aren't afraid to fight a war in the abstract, and there'll be usually a rally around the flag, but they don't like losing wars. They don't like getting bogged down in stalemates. And that's, I think, for a lot of people, what this is starting to resemble. It's the same story. The straits are closed. Gas prices are high. The Iranian government still seems to be standing. To get public opinion to turn around on this issue, one of those three facts is going to have to change. The straits will have to open, gas prices will have to fall, or the Iranian government will have to start to crumble.
But there's not overwhelming support or opposition. It's under 50% right now, and all those bad things have happened. So it's really just sticking with the course of action at the moment and having it kind of be a stalemate. Is it really going to move these numbers even further? And how, if so, when? Is it before November or after?
Yeah, so this isn't like Iraq, where there's boots on the ground, and every day you're turning on the TV and hearing stories of soldiers dying and things like that. It's more in the background. It's more when you go and fill up your gas tank. It's more in, every now and then when you're checking in on this story. I think it'll probably continue to erode, but I don't think it's likely to turn into kind of the catastrophic crumble we saw with the Iraq War, as the wheels started to come off on that war.
Excellent. All right, Spence, we've got one last slide to show our folks, and this is interesting. Go ahead.
Back to the healthcare CEO murder. Luigi's trial was just up. I think he admitted to 2 counts. So we went back in the field and we asked the same question. Do you think the actions of the killer of the United Healthcare CEO are acceptable or unacceptable? And 18 months later, it's almost the same. 17% acceptable, 72% unacceptable. So I guess the unacceptable is up a tick. I think the more concerning part is within that first poll, we found the 18 to 29-year-olds were closer to 40%, and that number has stayed the same as well. So not much changing on attitudes about that event.
I'm shaking my head that anyone would find a cold-blooded murder acceptable, but Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, I got nothing. I don't know. That's really jarring. I mean, that when you're looking at 17%, that's like 1 in 6 Americans saying that they think that it's acceptable to just shoot the CEO of a company in cold blood, a father. You don't have to like his job or what his company does, but the idea that we execute people for that is just really kind of chilling.
Very much so. Very much so. And I don't think we need to dwell on this any longer because it's very depressing. All right. But what is not depressing is Spencer Kimball and how he's going to tell us who's up and who's down this week. We're going to do that when we come back. All right, we're back for our final segment. This is what we all been waiting for. Spencer is going to share with his thoughts on who's up and who's down, or what's up and what's down. Spence, take it away.
So as I take a look at that plasma screen this week, we looked at those ballot tests. Marco Rubio, we have up this week. Secretary of State is performing slightly better than his opponent or potential opponent, JD Vance. So we put him up.
And we got another one.
We have the Democrats are up this week. We take a look at the generic ballot test. They're up by 8 points. We take a look at those head-to-head matchups. There's should be some encouragement for these candidates. So at this time, we have the Democrats up.
All right. And then sound effect, please. Wah, wah. Who's down?
So it's one of the toughest jobs in America, being the vice president. We have the two last vice presidents down, Harris and Vance, performing lower than their contemporaries in those ballot tests. So we put them down this week.
Okay. And final thoughts, Sean, as we got about 30 seconds to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think with Marco Rubio, he's Secretary of State, and I think in the long run, his prospects are locked in with this Iran war. If the Iran war, especially since he's considered the more interventionist between him and Vance. So if the Iran war goes well, I think his stock could continue to rise in Washington, D.C. But if nothing is resolved a year from now, I think Vance is going to have a pretty strong argument against Rubio in the primary that, you know, you're the one who wanted this war. You were Secretary of State, and look where we are today.
And Kamala Harris?
I think Kamala Harris, she's got momentum coming out of South Carolina. I think she's fine for now.
Got it. All right. Sean Trendy, Real Clear Politics. Thank you very much for joining us, Spence. Great to see you as always. Great numbers. Next week, folks, next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing some issue dynamics and polling and some very interesting college football stuff to share with you, as well as 9/11. So look for that in the coming episodes. Thank you very much and have a great week.